Okay.
Oh,
Well,
I've just turned the recording on. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. And for those who are going to be watching online afterwards. Graham and I were talking earlier today, and we sort of come up with the idea of what of talking about what sort of action, that you're going to put things that you're going to put in place in the week between each webinar. So we're sort of asking if you can think about that as we're going through the webinar, um, about what, because it's one thing to sit here and absorbed all the knowledge. But what are we going to do to actually create change in the week ahead? So maybe if we get to the end of it, um, those of you that have got some clear action that you'd like to take, or even some unclear, ambiguous stuff, yeah, we might take a couple of minutes at the end to run through that. So um, yeah, over to you, Graham.
thanks, Celia. Still organising my world here. Um, oh, and here comes Kirsten as well. Fantastic. Um, hey, Kirsten. Yeah. So, welcome to another week of the webinars. Feels like I've got a real Tasmanian feel happening with the weather today in uh, East Gippsland. It was hot yesterday and cold, windy, and 12 mils overnight. Um, so I'll just start with a few of these things. The definition, we have a definition for regenerative agriculture. Everyone says there isn't one. We have a triple bottom line one. And this one's that slightly different version where I've put profit, not production. If you could, anyone can suggest anything to make it clearer or make one themselves that's clearer, that'd be fantastic. But what I'm trying to do is say money and people are nested in this increasing land health, landscape function, biodiversity. So there's a lot of people talking about regenerative agriculture. They don't have a definition. It's not measurable. It's not auditable. And I think we need to kickstart this whole argument. If they're not increasing landscape function, um, then really, how can they be regenerative? Because they're still eroding the soil and stuff. So I'm trying to be really strong about that. Um, Australian net farm income, I'm going to come back to this a bit later. Jordan and I had I was going to say a discussion, but you could classify it as a bit of an argument, just as she was leaving. The About sort of the financials and who's responsible for doing things. So I've had a bit of a go, and then she volunteered to do that as part of her project. No, she didn't. I was going to say at the Southern Cross University. I was going to dob her in, but no, that's not true. So we'll work on this together, and some of these things we're going to need to work on together. um, I haven't got all that much energy and time left. The planet's going to last me, I think, but it's the our children's and stuff isn't going to be all that good. So we're continuing with the flat net value of farm production. We've got to break out of that. This is about the net value to farmers as a percentage of the gross is about 16%. It bounces around between 5 and 20, but it's on average, it's about 16% or somewhere between 10 and 20 generally. The bad years is when it drops down to 5%. And this forecast here is just terrible. So this one's a really big worry for me. This here, if this happens, people won't be able to afford to pay them their debt and things because the debt's continuing to increase. So just depending how this year goes and how you're managing, is going to be really important. So having said that, I'll go in. So just the landscape function. If you want the land to be stable, infiltrating water and cycling nutrients, it was really interesting. I've had a, a a young guy here, Emmanuel, sort of, and talking about this, and he'd been told that litter is not all that important because it doesn't have residence time, and the science is changing on that really strongly. That litter is more and more important, apparently, to the scientists. Whereas David Tongway and Norm Hindley, when they published this, they knew it was important. But if it's not decomposing in a biologically active and alive and healthy soil, it just oxidizes and goes back up into the air, back into the atmosphere. So, and like this is really rough and sort of depends on the percentage of basal cover and stuff. But generally, I think of half of the nutrient cycling coming from the perennial grasses and half of it coming from the decomposing litter. And the litter also includes the annual plants. So half and half is about a good way to think about it. But as you increase, and get higher basal cover, more mature perennial grasses, it starts to become more nutrient cycling from the grasses than from the litter. But generally, when you first start managing and increasing litter and basal, it's about half and half for nutrient cycling. I haven't studied water infiltration. We know as soon as you've got the soil covered, it's stable, but it's got to be covered, and everyone's ignoring that as well. And then just this relationship between recovery, stock density, and plant utilization. If you increase all three, you can't do one without the other. So if you increase recovery but don't increase stock density and utilization, you lock up too much carbon. If you increase recovery, you've got to increase stock density, you've got to increase utilization. I've worked with people that don't do that. And what happens is that they start to get woody weeds back. So, yeah, Spikey. The so you really need to be aware that if you increase recovery, you must increase stock density and utilization. So to increase the soil cover, the basal cover, the decomposing litter roughness, and therefore those things as well. This is what Celia was introducing, this idea. What am I going to do? This will be familiar with people sort of that have tried to delegate tasks to me. I keep saying, like I've had a go, I'm just about done. So everyone, if we're going to get out of this, everyone's going to have to start doing stuff. Um, and I'm thinking that, everyone's going to have to start thinking about what trials are you going to do or suggest to others? What materials are you going to produce? Are you going to do presentations or talks? Or are you going to do other things? And if you can think about from today's things, what are you going to do? Is it going to be something about the financials? Is it going to be telling people about, Kirsten's horse management? We've got to start spreading this because at the moment, every time I think it's catching fire, someone comes around and puts it out. Um, so we really need to be thinking about that. I'm going fast because there's lots of material up further. So yell out if I'm not. This, Jordan, was just a rough go. This is something that I've done before. So, which is lower risk, more profitable? Could have done with a comma, but I'll get Celia to fix that later. The cell, just noticed it. There was no need for that. Sorry, verbal diarrhea. Oh, apologies, Celia. So if you're in conventional agriculture, you keep about 16% of the gross value. So I just picked a number, $1,000, you're selling a steer at the sale yards, you're going to keep 16%. You're going to keep $160 in your business after you've fed hay, 16 bales of lucerne and all that sort of stuff. You're going to keep about 160 or 16% of your milk check, or your grain income. So that's on average, and it changes for different enterprises and different industries. But yeah, let's just keep that simple. $160. So what I've got here, the second one, is based on what I see from the people that are following what I talk about. So their animals aren't as big and they haven't been force fed, and this is worst case, they may not make as much money. This isn't what I see a lot of, but this would be the worst case. So they'd be only selling a $700 steer because they've got more grass efficient, smaller animals. The smaller the animal, the more of each bite of grass goes to production rather than to maintenance. We know all these things that the bigger the animals, the more the bite of every mouthful of grass, more of it goes to maintenance. So $700 steer, but you're keeping 70% because you're not feeding, you're not fertilizing, you're managing all those things at 50% of the stocking rate. Do you know? So yeah, I got those right. Do you know what I mean? This is completely different world that you like. No one would say, I'm going to sell cheaper steers and I'm only going to carry half of them and I'm going to make more money. No one that I know says that. The only people that I know are the Reynolds, the Coglins. They know they keep more money. So they're quite happy, but they're not at 50% of the stocking rate, all of them. But do you know what I mean? That's less. Oh, who said that? So Emmanuel said yes the other day. Oh no, I said it to him and he wrote it down. I said to be regenerative, you've got to be inefficient. You cannot focus on efficiency. So here they've got lots of grass. They skip over short rainfall periods or late breaks. You need to work out, how do I do this? And it's not easy if you've got high labor costs and all that sort of stuff. But the principle is what I'm trying to get across to people. The principle still applies, that most of the money we're giving away to the input suppliers. And it's just not right. We're making hay when we shouldn't. As soon as you make hay, you increase the cost of that dry matter 4 times. So even if it's only half as much value standing in the paddock, it's still better than making it into hay. So we've got all this skew if, but it's hard. It's because it's a bit of a Rubik's cube, and there's lots of moving parts in complexity. So you can only learn this by trialing and doing. So that's the key thing. So it's how was that, Jordan?
Yeah, good. Thank you. I was
Yes.
just
Sorry,
wondering,
go.
have you got any, do you know of any particular case studies um with in terms of financials that go into financials with uh
That's
holistic
that's
grazing?
based on people that I work with up in New South Wales.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. People are not all that comfortable to share all that, but
Yeah.
do you know, and they're sick of getting ridiculed for little animals and not many of them. Do you know?
Yeah.
So they actually don't push back. So they sort of like just go, oh, it's not my problem. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's really
Marshall's
hard to
got
get
his somewhere, I think, Graham, hasn't he?
that. So we need to go back because he was talking, wasn't he, that he's put in the wallaby proof fencing, and that sort of skewed all his numbers. But we could get the raw numbers and take out the that capital costs and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
this
and
is
there's also, oh, sorry.
oh, you go there.
There was that study that was done by Mark Gardner, wasn't there, at the Vanguard Business Services, and that looked, it wasn't so much a case study, but it looked at the benchmarking, wasn't it, comparing regen farmers with other farmers.
Yeah, and that's on the Farming for the Future website, um, which is sort of funded by MacDoc, and Sue Ogilvie that I trained in regen is now running a lot of that sort of stuff. So I'd be thinking about sort of going and having a look. And what it shows is as you increase. Oh no, there's two, isn't there? Sorry, I'm getting the recent stuff on the Farming for the Future. What's the other report? Oh, we'll attach that report, Celia, to the
Yeah.
thing because I've got it, or if you've got it. we can attach it. So this is a manual, just learning with the, hopefully that looks okay. That's what we've been grazing, when Jordan and I shifted, shifted the animals today. It was off this mature paspalum. I'm not sure how clear it is. It's really dodgy on my second screen. Hopefully it's a bit better on yours. And he's really getting quite proficient and stuff like that. I was making fun of him and, just making, making him do this because he struggles to do this bit. Just put the clip on. But that was pretty good. So,
Nice.
so I gave him a nice. So, like, because he'd had lots of criticism. So I said, see, I'm positive. And he'd been taught by um, by some of the presenters that we know that litter's wasted, and it doesn't last as long and it oxidizes. It's old science. It's about 2010 science on litter and soil carbon, or 2004 if you think that, if you know that David Tongway and Norm Hindley had already worked this out, that the amount of litter and the decomposition and the healthy soil makes it incredibly good for soil carbon infiltration and nutrient cycling. It's just like, oh, it's like Celia talks about sort of when they were in the poultry, sort of breeding poultry and stuff like that. Just because people say it doesn't mean it's right. And this is peer-reviewed science that shows that litter has a massive impact, yet everyone still goes around saying, don't worry about the litter, just worry about the root exudates. And it's just ridiculous. I don't understand how they can't read the latest science. So I used to say when I was at the DPI, I can't make you read it. If you're not smart enough to actually keep up, then it's not my problem. So I used to get quite into them. And then they'd ridicule me and stuff like that. And I'd put up those stages of change. So the first stage is to ridicule when you hear a new information. So if you spoke to most people about those financials and they'd never heard of this before, they'd ridicule it, then they'd ignore it, then they'd adopt it and change the name and think and pretend that they've thought of it themselves. So that's those stages of change. And when the scientists at the DPI, I'd put that slide up with the stages of change and then ask them where they're up to. So if they were still at ridicule, I was saying they hadn't moved on to ignoring me. So this is sort of in the paspala. There's plenty of mature feed. There's some green in underneath. I only just got them back working hard after the week set stopped. So it took 2 days to get them back working for a living after set stocking them during last week down in Tasmania. So they're back working. They're going pretty well. That's one of my favourite cows that goes pretty well. And I told the AI technician I wanted a bull out of her this year. So he promised me he'd make it a bull. So that she'd have a bull. So he thought that was pretty funny that I asked. So yeah, so it's all dried off here. Like we've had that great rains in January, dry Feb, starting to dry off now. But then had 14 mils last week and 12 mils last night. So gut fill 3 scores. Found it's really good for me having Jordan and Emmanuel and stuff because it teaches me what I'm doing, whether it makes sense. So I was trying to get Emmanuel to estimate what percentage of these cows are less than. I said I don't want them to be gut fill 3, and he couldn't work out. Well, what do you want them? And in the end, I had to say, I want you to record what percentage are less than gut fill 4, and he understood that. So, you know, he's got three languages. English is his third language. So I was making fun of him because he struggled with stock density and stocking rate. And this is in front of Jared, who owns the place here. I was making fun of him. And I go, and the other thing, Jared, he only speaks three languages, you know, so yeah, it's a bit hard. But yeah, stock density is how tight they are, which you can see on this photo, and stocking rate is what is the total grazing area divided by the number of animals. So they're quite different, stock density and stocking rate. This is what we did this morning. God, yeah. Could you imagine I would have been bouncing over the wombat holes and
Yeah.
I left the volume in. So we just called those cows out. They missed the gate. So and they're sort of going, what are you doing? You know. And then if I'd gone and chased them, you're right, they probably would have gone back up, you know, like, and then you'd using the gap in the fence was halfway down the fence, and they went straight past it the first time. So then I just drove through the gap and called them, and then these first couple came, and then everyone said, "Well, where'd they go?" There was a bit of a delay. You know, they've disappeared, and then everyone came. So, and then Jordan walked them all the way up the lane behind them on foot. I went back and got some of these reels and posts, and we've got the Polymaster 200 litre trough in the back of the buggy. So, um, just a quick one, grain feeding. Yeah, I would never knowingly feed children grain fed meat. It's toxic in terms of omega 6 and omega 3, and also the livers and the rumen wall and everything's just falling apart. So it's like, whoever thought of feeding them grain really needs to go in front of the Hague, I think, and there's crimes against humanity. Just being exaggerating. Some people say I'm prone to a little bit of that, but yeah, this happens all the time. When I was at the abattoir at Portland, we always did um, grass feds, and then for a new contract we went to grain feds. We went from 95% of the livers going and fit and healthy for exports. It was only the ones that had liver fluke and things like that. And when we went to grain feds, it dropped to, like well below, about 20% of them could go for export because they all had abscesses and sores on them. And, it's just an absolute disaster. And they stunk. If you've ever been in a chiller with grass feds and grain feds, the grain feds stink. When I've done taste tests with, chefs and people that I think of, winemakers and, those super taster types, they can pick the rancid undertones of the fats in the grain fed. So I don't want to go on about it, but don't eat it. So it's just an absolute disaster. It's bad for the environment. It's bad for people. It's bad for the economy. It's bad for the land. Um, just a quick photo. This is where I was last Friday at Celia's, sort of, and they're just using their fork through the macadamia trees. So,
Hazelnuts.
yeah, and Jordan's been running them for a couple of weeks as well. The students there on the Friday, we had sort of a bit of theory in the hall, and then went out and did some estimating landscape function. I gave them a bit of this about, people are going to ask you. So that you need to be able to sort of talk high input agriculture, and you're also going to need to be able to talk low input agriculture because more and more people are going to need this. So the current advice doesn't increase landscape function, doesn't lower risk and expenses and debt, doesn't lower fossil fuel and inputs, and I believe it doesn't lead to community well-being. When I've done surveys, and we had a Sydney University project, and it was like that social research called, where you go out and interview people. I can't remember the name of it, but the people that were high input, they would say, the best thing is that the children don't want to be farmers, and I used to say to them, is that the best thing? Like how can, because I used to go, how can that be the best thing? So, and the others, the low input regenerative types were saying they're leaving the option open. The kids don't have to be farmers. And yeah, they will, Spiky. Um, and then they'll go and talk about stuff that didn't work on their farms as well. They would say, we're trying to make sure that there's other tasks. I'm thinking of Sam and Claire Johnson that I've worked with a lot. They have their own processing now for pigs and beef, and sell into the Canberra markets and around that southern New South Wales area. Yeah, I just put this up for them that there is steps, and I just wanted to make sure it was in the notes. That you know, how are you going to cover the full time? Are you going to be able to automate it? Are you going to have a simple breeding enterprise because you can't buy them? You need one mob. All these words are important. You need to put trials in, what rapidly works. Then in the design, I'm always happy to help people with design of water and fencing, but I don't do the volume of water that you'll need. You're best to go to a professional to make sure that you get enough water at where you need it. And then you got to find size, either A or I, or find size. We've found that we've had to AI, so that'll thrive under this management. So we're up to about here, and got 2 years of AI under our belt now, and the second year's calves are due in September. So um, this is on Lilico's place at Smithton. Have I got Smithton right, Rob? So. Uh,
Smith
and
Yep,
Hill.
that's right.
yeah, just talking about doing some safe to fail trials. And Rob's gone through and done a fantastic job of designing them and calculating and stuff. And I was just going to try and use this as a case study, which Rob said he gave me permission to do a bit of a, what I would do versus, like what Rob's done. So Rob's gone and calculated it all from first principles. Um, yeah, and really good talk with John, with Rob's dad. And it sort of worked about sort of, you know, just spending some time. So, and talking about what I was doing rather than the presentation, which sort of, didn't hit the spot, I didn't think. Um, and some of the things that um, I found the most interesting was when John Lillico said to me, he goes, "Oh, don't you like multi-species pastures?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Oh, I didn't get that. I didn't get that from your presentation." I thought, I just need to say these things.
That is
I
multi-species covers, wasn't it?
Yeah, but they're really multi-species pastures, but they call them multi-species covers, but they're sort of permanent sort of pastures as well. And and I think that we're comparing these multi-species pastures that are high risk, high cost with poorly managed perennial grass lands. And I think we need to compare like for like and just be talking about that. So Rob's worked it out. So I say 3 square meters. So sorry, I'm down here. I say 3 square meters per cow, but Rob's actually calculated it exactly. Um, yeah, so if it was a square, it'd be 11.55, and then he's designed some. And the tricky part would be dealing with the how to get the fencing. I don't know whether it's worthwhile worrying about moving them off the fence, and I'll try and explain that because even though it'll be right in the middle of the Cape Weed patch, it does make things more awkward, and it doesn't fit with having to maintain these areas for about 10 years. Um, so just I'll go through why I say that and the whole thing. Really good electric fence voltage at 7,000 volts. Um, Water, usually we don't worry too much about water for because they're only in each of those areas for a couple of hours. But because there's four areas, that would end up being a whole day, sort of. So, um, yeah, so we might have to work about that. But I'd be looking at can I do something like Marshall does, where you take the float off one of the troughs and plug in, some wash down dairy hose or something so that you can have a trough in there. If there's only 40, like a 200 litre polymaster and things like that is usually what we do, or even smaller. Um, so the trough, I wouldn't would worry about putting it in there or accessing it, but it depends like how often you're going to do it. So the main mob are coming in and they're going to need that trough. So I'd be looking at in terms of the diagram, I'd be putting it over further, closer, and just using this fence because you want to leave it there for 10 years. So it's got to be pretty permanent. Um, the idea of these trials is not to show that you can control cape weed. It's also after you've controlled the cape weed, they're giving you constant feedback in case something else changes. So does it get drier? Does it get wetter? You need in complexity, you need more feedback. We don't get enough feedback to do this. So
Excuse me, Graham.
yeah, sure, Rob.
Um, so by 10 years, do you mean every, like, say, for the 12 month enclosure? So every 12 months, the cows will go back in there
Yeah,
for 10 years?
yeah.
Okay. Yep.
It's sort of like it's like having a dashboard running so all the time so that you've got no matter what you're doing in the on the main area of the farm, you've got these other things sort of uh, telling you has anything changed or are you not doing it properly or I used to I used to try and explain, and I don't know whether it's the funny way I explain things and stuff, but I knew that when those safe to fail trials were so good and my management was so bad, I couldn't look at them. So I'd ride past on the four-wheel motorbike and I'd look away. It's almost like putting the bills in the bottom drawer and ignoring them. I think most of us have done stuff like this. I couldn't look at them, and I used to say to people, they were going so well that they were just laughing at me. I was trying to get this idea that you need them constantly being the burr under your saddle or something annoying you, because otherwise you can sort of get into a rut where you think that you're managing okay. And I see this a lot in regen. They're in a rut. They think they're doing a great job, but they're not. And these trials actually running all the time do that. Having said that, I would usually put them on our place so that entrance to this 3 months was along this near the gate. And then I would swing that tape so that when they came along and went in here, that first 40 or whatever would go straight into this area so that you didn't have to herd them in. They just, as they came through the gate, not block the gate, but have it so is that clear, Rob? And if this was a tape fence here, I'd swing it across so that as they came in, they had to go in here into this first one, into the 3 months. And then
Yep.
I would make all of, sorry, you go.
Oh, yeah. Yep. That makes sense. Yep.
So it's easy to do. And I would make these ones. So typically, I always tried to make them units of what I was currently doing. So if you were on 40 days, then it might be what's 120 days. It might be every 3 laps or something. Or do you know that you go into these ones, or so that it's just something that's easy to do and not a chore. Oh yeah, I've put on the calendar that every 6 months, because they're 40 days. I'm trying to work out the maths and I can't do it. 40 into 180 was where I got stuck. And then I was going, 40 into, maybe make it 4 months, 8 months, so that it's easy. If you're going to stick to 40 for the next period of time, 40 days recovery or whatever you're on, just make it units of that. If you're already on 3 months, then I wouldn't worry. Maybe just do the 3 months so that you could see the difference between high stock density and low stock density. So I'd be thinking, how did I do that? How could I run it off the fence? How could I get them in easy? So I'm not saying that's what you do, but that would be the sort of things I'd be thinking about when designing them. And I'd make them sort of so that I always say that they've got to be able, if you put silage or hay into these safe to fail trials, the cows won't get in or the sheep won't get in. So a lot of the sheep people have to use ring lock and stuff like that to keep the sheep out, because otherwise they'll get in. I was a bit slow putting the power onto a plantation fence today when we've put them into the paddock, and a couple of the calves are already in the plantation that I've been sort of managing differently, and you just go, oh well. But you're trying to sort of know that I know exactly what I did. Here's the photos. I know, and then it actually helps you manage the complexity. The answers won't be right for many of these, but it'll give you the trends and the patterns of how your land responds. And then you can start to see, oh, well, with a lot of the dairies I'm working with, they're around about 6 to 9 months recovery. Most of the beef sheep, 12 months, but the dairies tend to have, until they get their genetics changed and start selecting for those older sort of almost like a New Zealand grass type, they need to change them. So is that all right, Rob? Any questions,
Yeah,
comments?
that's good. Thanks, Graham. Just one question about the soil tests. One thing I
Yeah.
really want to do is to try to quantify whether the soil has improved through testing.
Yeah.
And I think if I could do that, then um, that would be something that people would take notice of. So could you recommend like a soil test that I could take?
Yeah. So we've done, is it ESL?
EAL.
Struggling. EAL. I didn't,
Yeah, we
Earth,
did.
Earth,
We did
Earth
that
Sanctuaries
irrigated
Limited.
paddock. Yeah,
Yeah.
we did 2 lots, Rob, that day. The irrigated one and the one that you're going to seed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
So
and
those
that
two
will
were,
show different minerals like nitrogen and phosphorus and stuff like that.
what we did a conventional one test. Did I think I forwarded it through to you, Graham.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at it.
No, I didn't look closely either. We did the biological, the Haney's test, and we did the conventional test, Rob.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, I could send them
Well,
through to you. That would make
yeah,
that,
send them to Rob, and then that'd
yeah,
be a good thing to discuss next week. So
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
they only came
And
back a couple of days ago.
yeah, also, if I wanted to do a water infiltration test, Where could I get that? I suppose I could just Google it, but that device you had to dig into the soil.
It came from
That
the
too.
Meter Man. You just Google the Meter Man and he sends it to you, or you can just get the piece of poly pipe. I end up getting just like the collars instead of cutting it, because I tried cutting out a PVC pipe and I couldn't get the cut straight and it was driving me nuts. So I ended up just getting the collars that go over the pipe, and they're about $3 or $4 each, and I just bang them in.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So either. I tend to use a pipe when I've got to carry it a long way because that thing's heavy. Um, but the other thing with the access, Graham, that you were talking about, that the diagram that Rob sent through with the trials at Oakhampton, because it was a nuisance trying to get the sheep in and they were going through long grass, we actually put a laneway in front so we could actually block when we were doing the 3 and 9 month, that they only had to come out into the laneway and back into the 9 month.
Okay.
So I could do it by myself without losing them.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know if that's any good, Rob.
some of those things that sort of, but we can keep talking about that. I'll just oh, I've lost what I was trying to look at. Um, yeah, I think we need to. I'll try and think of. So, what you took them out this way into the laneway or something? I didn't
Well,
understand what you meant.
I put it like, well, they were against a fence, and then we put the laneway out in the paddock.
Oh, out here.
Yeah, so that
Oh,
I could
so that
get
they
them
could
out of the.
come out in the laneway and back in again, and come out like that sort of.
Yeah, when I had to skip one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've always tried to design them so that you didn't skip, you just went further. So, like
yeah,
if you wound this tape up, then they could go into that one. Wind that tape up, then they could go into that one. So, bit like
yep,
bit like Shelley and Chris's. So, but
yeah.
yeah,
But
this yeah,
if they're going for the 3 month and then the next one's like every 9 months, because we did the 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, that they didn't graze every one each time.
yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I just sort of I like to have bigger gaps and do them easy, but have them as multiples of each other so that it's easy to go from one to the other. But yeah, it's just probably my laziness or something. Yeah, and Spiky, the AI size, I use Johan Zietsman's group, so we can talk about that uh, next week and stuff. I'll get some things on that. So, um, but generally, people are going for older breeds and stuff like that. I've struggled to get, Angus that perform and things like that. I've got some, like that cow that I pointed at, but generally, that was an AI and that semen's no longer available and all that sort of stuff. So, this is one of safety fail trial in near Jericho at Damien's place, and this is the trial on this side. This has still got a lot of annuals, and this has got really dense perennials, and he's maintaining that, and with sheep and things, it's going really well. Um, I like that photo because this is him coming along. So he sold sheep cheaply in December because he just run out of grass, and then he's had rain, so he's in good shape, but sort of bit scarred on how cheap they were, excuse me, when he sold them, but glad that he's not stressing about feeding things now. He's only feeding a few ewes and stuff. And this is the neighbour's place, sort of, with their level of grass with the same rainfall. Um, Yeah, and this is sort of the big paddock. This is the safe to fail trial. You want them to look different. They can't look the same. And it's always a continual argument that, the whole farm's a trial. Well, no, it's not. It's got to be completely different management. So if you're on 12 months recovery out here at 3,000 stock density, then you'd do 24 months in here. It's never the same. You're not trying to find an answer. And I don't know how to explain that. You're trying to find difference and variation. And we find that we haven't found in a lot of the high rainfall zone of the East Coast, we haven't found an upper limit where it falls apart. And like that's the great worry. And that it'll be that old and rank that the animals won't like it. So the safe to fail trial that we've got here on Wattle Park was 10 years since it had been grazed. It had been locked up for tree regeneration and none of the trees regenerated. So we've been using that as a trial area. So too long is really a bit of a mental thing that we've got, and you might need to break it by doing your own 2 year trials. Yeah, Kirsten. So
Yes.
I was just going through. I was trying to skip through to make sure I had time to do yours. I think this looks fantastic. You know, I I remember being there. It's just great, sort of. So you've got these different areas. I really like this aerial photo with the four horses here, and showing that sort of it's only a small area of a small strip that you're actually grazing them in. So I
Yep.
thought that looked great. So
And
centralized laneway. I think we talked about that. So you go.
yeah, no, I've got the centralized laneway. The other interesting thing in that photo was the sort of the stippling and dotting on the grass paddocks. And I think you're basically picking up the cocksfoot plants, which have become really big.
Yeah, which is great because we want those big plants. So
So this
it
was
is
me.
like,
I went out in the morning and I just was photographing different paddocks and showing different things. So how useful each example is, yeah.
no, it's great.
So
Yeah, so typically, where grasslands or pastures are degrading, the pasture is worse near the water point or the gateway. Where they're regenerating and getting enough recovery and stuff, they're better near the gateway or the water. So this is called in the literature, it's called the biosphere, that ring around the water. So PIO, not BIO. When the guy was explaining it to me, while Ralph Whaley, who sort of wrote the book on native grasses and grasslands in New South Wales, and he was talking to me about biosphere, and I was hearing biosphere, and I'm going, what a biosphere's got to do with this? And it's just the pio from the drink, so the ring around. So it should be better where they walk through the gate, where they get more impact is the primary one, about 70 to 80%, and then more dung and urine. So we overemphasize the dung and urine. It's the actual impact and the stimulating the deep muscle massage of the land is what restores so much of this function and getting that rapid regrowth and stuff. I thought this looked great. So, any comment, Justin?
No, it's sort of like I take them off. It probably hasn't changed a lot in the last month or so. You take them off it and you turn around and like there's another 2 inches of growth on the cocksfoot and you turn around and there's another 2 inches. It's sort of like it almost grows by the day. Yeah, and this gets a fair bit of traffic because it's where I go up and down to the shed. It's where we bring the vehicle up with, bringing firewood up to the yard and stuff. Yeah, and it grows like stink.
Fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, and I can't believe, like, when you look on the aerial, it's that sort of narrow strip that goes around the arena. And I basically had to separate it off as a whole separate grazing cell because it's almost got to chop it into smaller bits to, yeah, it's sort
So
of, it's
is it here?
across the
Oh,
top.
here.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
yeah,
furrow
across
is
the
down
top.
the bottom, and it's the top and down the side and around the bottom, and it's just, yeah, down the right-hand side is nothing because that was gravelled for access down that side of the
Yeah.
property. But yeah, it's just this narrow strip around here, and thinking, oh, I don't need to move them faster because they're still leaving heaps on the ground.
Yeah.
Yes, you're getting really thick, heavy growth.
Yeah, that's it. Those people that got mature land care works and things like that, they cannot believe how much grass they grow, in those areas. And they're really tight little areas, but they can put them in for a day and they go, I can't understand why it's like it is. And it's almost like it just keeps going and getting stronger and stronger. So,
Yeah, and you almost don't have enough area that's not covered in manure and stuff where because the horses like to find an area, and this is where we'll dig and have a roll and a lay down, and
yeah,
it's hard, and they tend to like to select a cleaner area, but around there it's really hard because it's just been so heavily grazed and manured on. Yeah.
yeah, fantastic. So this is really good. I just wanted to, Spikey's made a comment. So the aim of the safe to fails are less about an experiment to get a single result, and more about an ongoing management reference point or a live landscape potential key. And I think that's a great description. So it is for management, it's for your management, and they're not triple replicated or any of that sort of thing. So it's not scientifically valid, but it provides you with that management reference point. And then if the whole environment changes, you will know where you need to go because you've got your safe to fail trials. So, and the other thing is, and that's why I always put that up early for people, the Benjamin in Somaliland, because the potential of the land is incredibly high, you know, but we don't get it. And it's when you see these things that Kirsten's talking about that it makes such a difference. So, and I just really like that, you know, uh, 5 months, not due to be grazed for 3 to 4 weeks. There's that they'll get a bit of a feed off that.
Yes.
So
And
and
it's
typically,
been
I,
yeah, sorry, and it's been
sorry,
dry in Tassie. And what you said last week about the long grass sort of folding over and creating this little microclimate in underneath there,
yeah,
and that's exactly what there is. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like that canopy closure is just so important. There's two things, but you can have canopy, and then you can have if you don't have enough diversity, like perennial ryegrass will fall over and lodge, and it'll fall over and lodge in the one direction, and you won't get any growth underneath it. And it's almost acting like a thatched roof. And the corrective action is to go in there and really trample it and eat a lot of it, to get it to stimulate to grow again. But that's a well-known problem. I learnt it from Alan Savory about if it all lodges in the one direction, it sort of inhibits growth. Um, so lodging can be a problem, and I think you say some of that up here.
Yeah, that's where
Yeah,
this is a new thing I'm seeing because the grass is getting ahead of my horses. Like you sort of want to increase your grazing density or
yeah,
livestocking. And so
yep,
the word is lodging when I talk about this mulching sort of falling over.
yeah. So the crops lodge and the grasses lodge is that's the language that the ag people tend to use. But yeah, anything's valid. But if it all lies in the one direction, it inhibits growth. And I believe that it's damaging or inhibiting the water cycle and stops things happening because it's happening like a thatched roof in my head, but
Yeah.
I haven't confirmed that. So yeah, so you've just got to make sure that you're doing that. And then when you do go in and you come out of it, you've got to have it all like messed up and things like that. Yeah, so I like what you're saying is you sort of instead of worrying about feeding the horses, you're worrying whether you need another horse. So
And I don't want
most
another
people,
horse.
no, I keep saying the hardest thing is to get people to get rid of horses. So like yeah, so uh yeah, so this might just need longer trampling or higher stock density and things like that. And you could find that out through your soft safe to fails. But I don't think you'll be resting it too long. It'll be whether you can actually get enough impact and utilization if they do that. If there's areas that are different ages, you've got them running on younger grass, their hind guts, the bugs in their guts will be set up to eat that. And then if you go to different, they'll have to take a little while to adjust. So we find that with sheep a lot. So putting them into safe to fail trials when they haven't been used to it. So
Yeah.
and trees, yeah, I don't want to say too much. It upsets people when I comment about trees, but I think it's valid. So waste of space for my grass, I usually say. So yeah. Yeah, a new place to lunch. Yeah, good idea. So but yeah. So I want to just before we finish, just sort of if you could think of any of those things that you could do. I think this is a great case study, and the change over time is just fantastic. Most people would be, the horse health, I'd imagine, is excellent.
Yep.
Less hay, all those things, all the benefits of it. I think it's a fantastic case study. It'd be a great thing to for us to start writing up and putting on the what are we calling rant now? I got stuck there.
I just that.
On
Yeah.
the rant website. I was trying to think of a new name. We think we need a new name for rant. So regenerative's okay, but the acronym's not. So
So yeah, I guess it's like, should I change what I'm doing? Should I have allowed, I guess when the grass starts falling
I'd do some
over,
more. Yeah, I'd do some more trials. And I wouldn't be afraid to sort of have a go, but we found that 3 months recovery wasn't long enough in La Nina. So it may, it's that sort of stuff. But you've increased the landscape function so much on so much of what I've seen that maybe it is shifted to a shorter recovery. So maybe just a little trial at the end of one of those strips.
yep.
And then is there any way that you can increase their stock density and give them a higher, little shorter one to see whether that's needs to increase and stuff like that. So
Yeah, we did
um,
instead of moving it daily, we've started moving it twice a day, so giving them just a narrower strip, but
yeah,
two of them in a day, so that hopefully, they stomp it more and
yeah,
bash it
you
down
got
as
to put.
opposed to selectively walking around it.
And it works well with horses if you pull them in tight. You like shorten the distance that they can go forward. As long as they can go back, they tend to behave pretty well. So um, they're a funny breed of cattle, I always found. So
Yeah,
um,
you don't want to make
yeah,
it, you want to give them enough room that if somebody gets a bit argy and starts
yeah,
swinging, they can get out of each other's ways. They're a little
yeah,
bit more reactive than your cattle and stuff.
yeah. And people would say to me, "Oh, you've got the cattle so tight, that's cruel." And I go, "Back, there's no back fence. Like we only ever bring the back fence up now and again when we ship the water. So, so we can, so it's that sort of thing. So, very good. Any comments, thoughts, any questions?
The only thing, Graham, is that because I'm visible from the highway, lots of horse people are starting to see, because nobody's got grass at the moment, and they're all going and buying extra hay at the moment. And they go, oh, yeah, Kirsten's always got grass. Oh, you're lucky you've got grass. And I keep telling them there's no luck. But, through Facebook, somebody made a nice comment about my property, and I made some suggestions about what I'm doing it, because they're sort of asking questions. And today I got a message from this random person on Tas Horse saying, could you give me a ring and chat about it? And so I'm going to, you know,
Oh, nice.
invite her up and say it's
Yeah.
easier to come and have a look. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, because otherwise you get into weird conversations. That's why I wanted to hear that, because they say, oh, I don't think so. And what you need to be able to say is, well, this is what it looks like. We can do this. I'm sure you can do it as well. We can't have people thinking that you need, like, to be Einstein to do it. You just got to have the same, you've got the same resources as everyone else. Like, smarter, I always say, I'm no smarter, no thing. I just thought this would work and it does. So, it's that sort of somehow getting people to look at it. So, very good. I'm going to go out and shift my cows. So,
What action are people going to take?
Well, I'm going to invite this lady up over the weekend and walk her around.
fantastic. Yeah.
Awesome. Big tick, Kirsten.
Rob, you're doing your safe to fail.
Who's that? Me?
Rob's doing his safe to fail.
Yep.
Yeah.
Spiky said she's putting a website up. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, and Jordan's internet dropped out.
Ah,
She's glad I did the financials,
cool.
even though I told her she needed to do it. So. Okay, everyone. Thanks for that. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Graham.
Bye.
Thanks, Celia.
Drop us an email or more questions. Perfect.
Great. Thank you.